Hey YouTube, today we're going to be looking at a pretty neat rifle here. And what I have here in front of us is a Winchester Model 94 chambered in 30-30. And before we go any further, I'm going to show everybody on the YouTube world that this Winchester rifle does not have anything in it, and we are clear to make this video. Now, what we have here, this is a Winchester Model 94 chambered in 30-30, and I wasn't sure whether I wanted to go down this rabbit hole or not, because Winchester rifles is another thing that these crazy collectors really start getting involved in, and they really overthink stuff. So this one right here, this is a Winchester Model 94. This is chambered in 30-30. Let me show you some of the close-ups here. You'll see right here where it says 30-30 Winchester. And I'll give you a little bit of history on these things and what the crazy people here think about these. So this particular rifle was manufactured in 1979. And this rifle came out, this thing was introduced in 1894. It was designed by one of my favorite people in the entire world, John Moses Browning, the maker of the famous 1911 and the Browning High Power. Even though he didn't finish the High Power, it was his design, folks, that started it, and he made the 1911 that was introduced to the United States Army in 1911. Well, he developed this in 1894, and it was originally chambered in 3240 and 3855, which is a smokeless powdered cartridge. And then in 1895, Winchester changed the steel they were using and everything so they could use smokeless powder, and out came the 30 WCF. And that confuses a lot of people. And what 30 WCF is, it stands for 30 Winchester Centerfire. Well, that later became known as the 30-30. And the reason being is Marlin, one of Winchester's biggest rivals, started producing a rifle with the same caliber, and they didn't want to write Winchester centerfire cartridge on their rifles, so they actually started writing 30-30 because it's a 30 caliber bullet and it takes 30 grains of smokeless powder when they are loaded. So that's where the term 30-30 started at. Now, what a lot of crazy collectors look for in these rifles is they want a quote-unquote pre-64 rifle. And I'm going to try and explain to you folks what that means, how much it means to me, and what it should mean to you. Now, these rifles, over the stage of time, they were in production from 1894 to 2006 is when they stopped making these rifles by Winchester. And I think they made another very small run of them, like in the mid-2000s, like 2010, 2011, but pretty much they stopped making these in 2006. Now, the big major changes that came was this was a pretty expensive rifle to produce. They're very well made. Winchester is one of those companies that you pay a premium for because it's a top tier name. They really make good stuff. Well, these things were pretty expensive to produce, and in 1964, they changed a couple things that they did on these rifles. And the first thing people look at when they look at one of these rifles is they look underneath here at this gate and look for a little set screw in it. If it has a set screw in it, it is a pre-1964 rifle. And what they did is they changed this receiver. It wasn't completely machined the same way, and the bluing did not look as good on it. They put cheaper wood on it, and it just cheapened up the manufacturing process and made it more affordable for the general public to be able to afford. Well, they got a lot of backlash from the public and everything when they first started doing that. So in the 1970s, about the mid-1970s, they started putting the good stuff back in it, the machine parts on the inside, the bluing's a lot nicer on it, like it used to be, and the wood is a lot better. It still doesn't have the set screw in the bottom of it, but These rifles are pretty well made. Even the ones that were made post 1964, right after, are really well made. They just didn't hold their bluing, the finish as well, and the wood didn't look quite as good on them. But one of the differences is when you open this action up to it, if you look down at this little ramp right in here, and the immediate ones preceding 1964, this was like a cast piece of sheet metal or something like that. And then in the 70s, they went back to a machine piece, as you can see in here. So if you were going to buy a Winchester 94 and you were not wanting to go spend a gazillion dollars on a pre-64 weapon, pre-64 rifle, that's usually probably going to have a bunch of wear on it anyway. And if you get one in pristine condition, you have to mortgage your house to buy. My recommendation is to buy one that's made in the 70s, like this one right here. I'm not saying they're cheap, folks, because no Winchester rifle is cheap, but this is probably the most bang for the buck. Now, what the Winchester 94 is known for is it's a smaller rifle than its competitor, the Marlin. And some of the differences, and we'll do a side-by-side on a Marlin rifle one day, but one of the differences is on the stock, it doesn't have the pistol grip when you grab the rifle to fire it. I call it a pistol grip. It has a little hump here for you to hold your hand. Well, the Winchester does not have that. And it's usually a lot smaller receiver. And the reason being is when you pull this action back, the whole action drops out the bottom of a Winchester rifle. And on a Marlin, it stays inside. So this allows a larger cartridge to go inside of a smaller receiver, which is kind of neat, kind of a genius design. Now, one of the other things about Winchester rifles that a lot of people notice on these things is when the action is pulled back and it ejects the shells, it ejects it straight vertical out the top. And that makes it very hard to put a optic on it, like put a scope on it. Now, what people don't understand is in 1894, there weren't a lot of scopes available, so people mainly used iron sights on them. So that really wasn't an option. But in today's time, people will put these side mount scopes on them, and the scope has to be mounted off to the side so the shells can eject when you pull the action back. Now, one of the other things that these things feature is they have a lever safety in them. If you look real close right here on the bottom, if you pull this action back, this hammer back, it will not go off, folks. It won't. But if you look real close here, if you push up on this lever, you have to grab onto this lever. There's a little button there. That's what allows the action to go off. So it does have a safety in it for ease of operation. Now, their biggest competitor is Marlin. Marlin also has a safety on them, but you don't have to grasp onto the lever like this when you do it. Now, this rifle is probably the most successful high-powered rifle of all times. They produced about 7 million of these things over the years, and I think it was the longest running high-powered repeating weapon rifle ever produced. Now, it loads through the side gate right here. You load the shells in right here, and it goes all the way down this tube. I believe these hold like 7 rounds in them. And they've been used for hunting. I think the 30-30 cartridge, somebody told me one time that it's taken more large game than any other caliber ever produced. And I don't know if that's true or not, folks, but that's just what I heard. As you know, I'm not a hunter, so I don't use this for hunting. I'm just a Winchester fan, and I'll just tell you, I like Winchester rifles. Now, after the 1964 backlash, and they started making these guns again back up to the quality with the pretty bluing on it, the pretty wood, and the machine parts on the inside, they made another change in 1982. And in 1982, they started making them angle ejected on the top. Now, the reason they were doing that is so you made it easier to put a scope on it. So the shell's ejected at an angle and it wouldn't hit a scope if it was put on the top. Now, when they did that, they also went to the little tang safety that was up here. It had a little safety on it, and what that is is that is a firearm company that fears attorneys. So they started adding safeties onto it, which you really don't need because you have your little lever safety right here. And a lot of people don't like those. They don't like the angle ejected ones. And I'm not a fan of them because I like things to be in their original design. Things were designed to work a certain way, and when you start altering that, you usually have problems. And I'm not saying you're going to have problems with any of these rifles when you buy them, but I just like to leave things the way they were designed. Now, these collectors, they'll look down upon this because it wasn't made before 1964. Well, I'm not a collector, folks. I like Winchester rifles. And nobody that has Winchester rifles, ever fired Winchester rifles or anything, will ever tell you that they ever had a problem with these actions on any of them. Even the later model ones with the chain safeties on them, these things all operate exactly the same, and there's minimum differences when you look at them, even looks. This gun looks exactly like a pre-1964 Winchester 94, except for this screw on the bottom. There's no difference. I'll show you the serial number here. You can see this gun was made in 1979, if you know how to look that up. I'm not going to go through how to do that, but Winchester offers a lot of databases that will show you exactly what year this was manufactured. And you can trust me, this gun was made in 1979. And once again, we'll show you some of the roll marks on the top of it. Some of the earlier ones had all the Winchester insignia written right here on the chain. This one does not. But the reason that 3030s existed is because of hunting, and it was the very first high power hunting smokeless cartridge to ever be introduced. And they've made a ton of these, folks, and I wish they still made them, to be honest with you. I mean, they're just an awesome weapon. I'm not an expert on lever guns, but I have a couple of them, and I'll show you the two main competitors one day. We'll do it side by side with a Marlin and a Winchester, but really, when you think of a lever gun, you think of a Winchester, and that's just the way most people think. But anyway, I just want to go show you this Winchester 94 chambered in 3030 and see what y'all thought about it. I want to know how many people actually care about the pre-64 and the post-64 and the vertical eject and the angle eject and all that kind of stuff. I know all that stuff, folks, but I really don't care about it. This, in my opinion, is the most bang for the buck to have, is one made in the 70s. That's still vertical ejects, has the beautiful bluing on it, has the pretty wood on it, and still operates smooth as butter. But if you have any questions on this, folks, I'm not an expert on Winchester 3030 rifles or Winchester Model 94s, but I do know a little bit. I know how to identify a lot of them, and I know enough to be dangerous. But anyway, folks, thank you very much for watching my video today, and you folks have a great day.